Welcome to Yin Yoga Lifestyle. I am your host, Colette Darville. Cultivating our body's resilience and inner silence and its application to all aspects of your life. Let's become enlightened and enjoy the power of intuitiveness and creativity. You are listening to Society Bites Radio, social interaction for the mind and soul. Hello, and thank you for joining us today. I am your host, Colette Darville, and this is Yin Yoga Lifestyle. So now let us take a deep meditative breath. Inhale, so. Exhale, hum. Bill Protzmann launched Music Care Inc. in 2011, a for-purpose corporation. Music Care's mission is to remind people of their built-in ability to use emotions for good and offer proven practical tools for our access to music as a behavioral, emotional, physical, and spiritual self-care modality. He is a successful IT entrepreneur who holds a magna cum laude degrees in piano performance and creative writing and brings music to audiences in non-traditional ways. Bill is also the author of More Than Human, a book that talks about the human spirit, your human spirit, and its power in your organization. It's the something more about lifeness that is discussed in the book. Bill explains that somethingness might be fierce, courageous, and daring, or subtle, steely, and calm. Even if it feels like your interior embers glow red or burned out, that human spirit is what we call spirituality. And that's where it gets real. The practice of human spirit, practical spirituality. To make that work in your organization, you want best practices with contagious acceptance, unlimited scalability, and tremendous value, starting with yourself. Let's do it. Your human spirit deserves it. Welcome back to Yin Yoga Lifestyle, Bill.
Thank you so much, Colette. It's great to be here, and I love that introduction. Let's do it.
Let's do it. You said it. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Um, Bill, can you talk about how and why you came to write the book, More Than Human?
Sure. I volunteer with veteran services and veterans organizations, veteran serving organizations. And we were working on a project to investigate moral injury and what we could do sort of to intervene with that. Moral injury is that complicated place where you're taught because it's the right thing to not kill people. And yet, if you're in combat, that's your job. So that creates this tension, if you will, between what you believe and what you have to do. And that moral injury can be very destructive psychologically. So our team was trying to figure out how we would get in front of that. And I found that there were these things that we do that are not morally injuring, they're morally sustaining. And moral is kind of a fuzzy word, so let's get real about this. These things are things like gratitude and kindness and respect and honor and integrity and collaboration and discernment. These attributes of us as human beings turn out to be best practices. And by practicing them, they also wind up being interventions for the kind of moral injuries that happen regularly, I think, to all of us. There's trauma related to that.
Right.
When you have to do something you don't believe in.
Yeah.
Because you have to do it. So those little traumatic moments are there to help us refocus, realign, choose wisely, all of those other kind of good things that you could say that sound so cliche, but they're really important.
Right.
And to sort of document all of that and offer people how to in engaging in spiritual best practices that come from our human spirit. I wrote a little book, and it's available out there for anyone or any team that wants to dial up their effectiveness, their performance. These things turn out to be very good for organizations to practice, because if your entire organization is respectful, guess what? Other organizations want to work with you.
Of course, that's right. Yeah,
so
absolutely.
There's research on this, business research, and how important gratitude is. And that's pretty fashionable these days. So is resilience. There are buzzwords out there, authenticity.
Yeah.
These are all things that come from our human spirit. So that's what the book is for. And it's been, interestingly enough, the day it launched was the day of the eclipse. Remember that back in 2017?
That's hilarious.
It was
Yes.
just
So what a
like,
great day to have your book launch.
I guess so. I mean, it's auspicious in one sense.
Yes.
And of course, Amazon. But the curious thing to me was that it hit number one internationally in both the business and spirituality categories.
Yes, because you do. And I read that. I read that.
It's like,
Um,
wow.
that's fantastic. But but a lot of people relate spirituality to religion,
Yeah.
but you talk about practical spirituality, right?
Yeah.
Can
I
you
don't want to,
define it a little bit more? Could you define it for our listeners?
sure. Um, it's hard to talk about spirituality without your religious heritage sort of resonating in the background.
Right. Yes.
And that's fine. I'm really good with that. It's also hard to talk about spirituality when you're in a room full of atheists
Right.
because there's no sort of religious background for that. But the
Hmm.
the point is that we all come together around practices that work. And if you think of a practice that comes from a deep place inside you that wants to offer connection and authenticity and to relate as a human being, that kind of practice is a spiritual practice. And it could be
Yes.
you singing a lullaby to your child, or it could be you offering respect to your boss. It comes from the same place. So, for
Yeah.
want of anything better, I'm calling those deep human spirit triggered kind of activities that we do, the attributes of us, spiritual practices.
Right. Yeah. And it's you can, I mean, you can be spiritual without being religious.
Yes.
And uh but now you have written this book to be used by everybody, but for organizations. So can you explain what it is to build an effective and sustainable human organization, and how does this apply to our families as well?
This is a fantastic question. If we had hours, we could really get into it.
We
um,
can get you on another podcast.
we start a whole podcast by itself.
Yes, exactly.
We've all experienced what it's like to not be in an organization that has kindness, for example, in it. Pick any attribute that you like. Where it's a fear-driven organization, and you do what you do because the boss says so. And those organizations have taken us a long way. They really have. The top-down sort of industrial mode model has taken us a long way. And
Yeah.
organizations are beginning to transform to be less of that kind of top-down model and more of an integrative model where people get to participate more or less equally in developing things like direction and solutions and creative, endeavors when they come up. And this is something that's happening in families too. So I'm probably a third generation, mostly. I mean, I've immigrant in both sides of my family, but more or less third generation. So in my family history, there was a lot of this top-down thing, Western European descent. So there's the, father is the patriarch, and he sets the direction, and that's what goes on. And don't ever, wait till your daddy gets home. That kind of thing.
Right.
That
Yes.
fear-driven. And there's a place for that. I'm not saying discipline is a bad practice. It's actually a very good spiritual practice, but the fear component of it doesn't need to be there.
Right.
And as we're transitioning in our era right now, away from that top-down environment to more of a collaborative one, and we're starting to notice that things like cooperation work much better than competition. Collaboration is the new model, working together. Even if you're literally in competition selling the same kinds of widgets, you can still collaborate and do more than you could do if you were just competing with your, the next person down the road. This model it's like a tectonic shift in how we think about organizations, from families, from dyads, from two people in relationship, all the way up to giant enterprises. And it's a tough change,
Yeah, it is a
but
tough
it's
change.
happening.
Yeah.
There's research on gratitude. There's actual clinical research on gratitude. I love this.
Yeah.
We have to
Yeah.
look at it with numbers and metrics in order to believe that it works. But okay, fine, do that, you know? In the meantime, I'm just going to be grateful.
Yes, exactly. Um, now, can you talk about what are some of the game plans and strategies that can produce change in an organization? Because does it come from employer to employee, or can it come from employees to employer?
You know, we've seen it both ways.
Yeah.
It's really important, I think, in the military organizations, the ones that operate by top down, because that's the only way they work. It's really important to see some of the military commanders opening up around things like post-traumatic stress and saying, "Yeah, I had this issue and I got help." That's a huge spiritual step forward in leadership
Yeah.
because it allows the leader to be more authentic. And that kind of authenticity from the top can be very inspiring for people who are serving the leader. It also works bottom up. So if you're the lowest man on the totem pole, and believe me, as a consultant in IT, I'm always the lowest man on the totem. You know, it's like there, you get real humble,
Yeah.
but in that place, you can be very infectious. And spiritual best practices are contagious. They're actually fun to do and they feel good. So when you find out that that you can show respect to somebody who's way levels above you, and by doing that first before making your pitch, for example, um,
Hmm.
you create a human connection there. So you're not just heard as another data element in the long day of data elements. You're heard as a human being. Uh,
Yeah.
that kind of thing can go so far in an organization, and even in organizations that have been very top down. For example, hospitals. I just learned about the kind of ways that new ideas are surfaced in hospitals, and they're surfaced by a team of people who aren't necessarily leaders. They're basically just people who work there, who meet
Hmm.
regularly, and their purpose is to come up with best practices and then to offer them up the chain with supportive research. And if there's research that shows the idea works and it's accepted in the organization, then that idea is sent out to like all the hospitals in the world who are looking for a way to do X, whatever X was. So it can be from the bottom up too.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's crazy, but
A lot
you
of
know,
people don't think, a lot of employees don't think they have that power, right?
oh, it's yeah, and it's being welcomed. I think more in this collaborative world as we shift from bigger, better, faster. That disaster we've seen where that goes. As we shift from that to a more, hey, let's be integrative. Let's work together. Let's find out you know, what's that
Yeah.
amazing movie where the janitor at Harvard or MIT or something turns out to be a genius and teaches classes?
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
That's a great movie. That was a great movie. Um, you're talking about research. I have a question here that shows some research.
sure.
And the Gallup research found that a lack of appreciation is the top reason that most Americans quit their job. And I'm not just saying Americans, probably worldwide. Companies that have a strong recognition program that at saw that at 23.4% drop in employee turnover compared to companies that had no programs of appreciation. In businesses that valued recognition are 12 times more likely to see strong business results. So the benefits of recognizing employees are clear. Um, but why does showing appreciation work, and how can employees craft an effective recognition strategy? I think that's really what it comes down to, doesn't it?
It really does. I love to feel like I belong with a team.
Right.
When I feel that sense of belonging, I will do anything for that team or for the leader. And I've been fortunate enough to work for teams where that's part of the ethos of how things get done. And I've been fortunate enough to work for the other kind too.
Yeah.
You can do that when you're a consultant. You get to interface with a lot of different people. And it just makes such a difference to feel the appreciation, the belonging, the sense of being a part of something. These are important things that human beings need. We're tribal. I mean, we want to belong to our tribe. And when you're
Yes.
spending, I don't know how much of our life is spent at work, whether you work for yourself or you work for a large corporation or nonprofit, there's that sense of being a feeling a part of it. Even if a part of it doesn't seem like it makes a difference on the world scale of everything, oh, it doesn't
Hmm.
matter. People will follow you to the moon if they feel belonging in your organization.
Yeah. Yeah. And
So
it's
the
it,
stats make sense to me.
and there are so many people that have such a trying time at work.